Jamaica is a land of power, a land of history, war, resilience, and spirits that never rest. This island was built on the backs of the enslaved, but their spirits are still here, moving through the land, the water, and the wind. The transatlantic slave brought over 1 million Africans to Jamaica, forcing them into brutal labor under Spanish and then British rule. But even in the midst of suffering, their spirits never broke. The Maroons, Jamaica's first warriors of resistance, weren't just soldiers. They were spiritual warriors, fighting with the knowledge of the land, their ancestors, and forces unseen. They used obeah, herbal medicine, and sacred rituals to protect themselves and defeat their oppressors. Their spiritual strength was their greatest weapon, and that power still lingers in the hills, rivers, and sacred spaces they once called home. But the past is never just the past. It moves, it breathes, it walks among us. Spirits roam freely in Jamaica more than anywhere I've ever been. Some are lost, restless, still searching for peace. Others are protectors, guiding us, watching over us like the shadows in the night. And then there are those who exist between worlds, spirits so strong that they appear just like us, as if the veil between the physical and the spiritual world no longer exists. In this video, we're diving deep. We'll explore why spirits move so freely in Jamaica, why some never find rest, and how this land itself is alive with memory. We're talking about spiritual realms, the sacredness of the earth and water, and how I personally recharge every single time I return home. Let's start with the first warriors of resistance, the Maroons, and how their spiritual strength shaped Jamaica forever. To understand the spirits that still roam, you first have to understand the Maroons. These weren't just runaway slaves. These were warriors, tacticians, and spiritualists who understood that their fight wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. They were the first people in Jamaica to resist colonial rule, and they fought with more than just weapons. They fought with the land, with their ancestors, and with the unseen forces that protected them. When the British took over Jamaica in 1655, many enslaved Africans escaped into the mountains and became Maroons. Led by warriors like Queen Nanny and Cudjoe, they waged guerrilla warfare against the British for over a century. Queen Nanny wasn't just a leader. She was a spiritual force. She used African spiritual practices to make bullets disappear before they could hit her warriors, call on ancestors for protection and guidance, use herbs, chants, and rituals to keep her people hidden. Nanny didn't just fight the British. She fought them with the spirits of those who came before her. This wasn't just war. This was spiritual warfare. And this is where we start to understand why spirits still roam Jamaica. Because when a land carries, like I said, this much history, this much war, trauma, and power, the energy doesn't just fade, it lingers. Some spirits move freely while others are trapped. But to this day, the veil in Jamaica is thinner than most places on earth. And here is why. Welcome to a video that just really resonates with what home feels like to me. Jamaica is more than just an island. It's a land where history is alive, where spirits roam, and where the present and past constantly intersect. From, like I said, the resilience of the Maroons to the sacredness of the land and water, there's a spiritual depth here that most people just don't understand. Today in this video, we're going to dive deep into the history of slavery, resistance, and spirits that still move through Jamaica. And I'll share how I personally recharge my energy every single time that I visit. I love Jamaica, and I hope that after you tap into this video with me, you're able to find a newfound love for Jamaica, for the history, and for the growth. Let's get into it. Okay, hey y'all, welcome to this week's YouTube video. If you're new here, my name is Kayanu Rich, and here we heal, we grow, we glow, and we become the best versions of ourselves. If you're returning, hey besties, Welcome to the YouTube channel. I'm super excited to do this video. To be honest with you, I have probably recorded this video now 2 or 3 times because Jamaica just means so much to me, and I wanted to make sure that I was doing it justice. I wrote out my script like 17 times. And then Spirit just said to just do what is on your heart. And if you guys have any questions in regards to this video, you will always be more than welcome to ask me any questions that you have anyways. So let's get into it. As you guys can tell by the title and the introduction, today we are talking about Jamaica, the heritage, and you know, I thought that this was perfect during Black History Month to talk about the spirituality behind Jamaica and why I love Jamaica so much. As you guys can see from clips of the video, I go to Jamaica religiously. I think that I have so much content on my phone from Jamaica trips that I have taken over the past couple years. But I was born and raised by 2 Jamaican parents, and so Jamaica and its culture and its history is definitely something that is not new to me. I was raised by spiritual parents. Both my mom and my dad are both very much so spiritual beings. And so I feel like there has been a lot of traditions and a lot of things that have just been naturally passed down to me that has become a part of my everyday practice, that with real research, I've been able to really draw the connection as to where these things have come into play and how they've come into play. So before we get into this video, make sure that you grab your water, your tea, whatever it is that you need. I have me some peppermint tea, and let's get into this video. Let's talk about it, okay? So a couple days ago, I had tweeted, I had posted a tweet. I'm gonna put it right here, but I had posted a tweet and I was basically talking about how this last trip that I took to Jamaica was my first time really seeing a spirit, and the spirit looked like a natural being. The spirit looked like you and I. They looked very natural, and I got a lot of questions. A lot of people were asking me about, you know, Jamaica, about spirits, about a whole bunch of questions, and so I've really been trying to find the right way to put things into words, and I've really been trying to find the perfect way in order for me to talk about this video. So without further ado, let's get into, you know, the main nitty gritty. So as we kind of talked about in the intro of the video, you kind of already know about the Maroons. We know about Nanny Maroon, and how Nanny of the Maroons, she used spiritual warfare, obia, and African traditions to protect her people. So that is the root of what Jamaica is all about, right? And then for me, honestly, I feel like there are a lot of elemental ways to look at spirits in Jamaica and to look at that as an overall aspect. But what I like to look at is maybe like putting spirits into 3 or 4 different categories. So the first one is duppy, okay? And so when we look at duppies, we talk about like the restless souls. I have my notes, so I just want to make sure that I go over everything. The earthbound spirits, which is the duppy, right? And these are usually restless souls. They're often tied to improper burials or unresolved trauma or even sudden deaths. And so I feel like with island and obviously not having the opportunity to have all of the amenities that we do in Canada or America, there are a lot of steps or parts of the process that they don't experience or that they have to experience that we don't when it comes to life and death. And so one of those things is improper burials. Now, in Canada, I have been to a few funerals, and the funerals that I have been to be quite honest to you, when I'm looking in the ground, they are buried, 6 or 7 feet or whatever, 8 feet deep, whatever it is, they are buried deep, deep, deep in the ground. And one thing that I've always noticed, but I feel like one thing that I've really taken note of as I've really started my spiritual journey is taking into account how the burials are done in Jamaica. So for a lot of people, obviously, if you don't have the money, if you don't have a family or whatever the case is, a lot of times there is not a real burial that is done, right? And again, going back to our ancestors not being able to have been properly buried, there is also that annotation to it as well. However, I do feel like when I look at it, the way that they bury people is completely different. I feel like the people are almost buried on surface level. And I don't know, maybe that's me like just feeling how I feel, but when they are being buried in Jamaica, it's almost like when you look in the ground, or like when you look in the burial hole, they are still pretty high. Like they're not buried as deep as they are in Canada or in America. They're not buried that deep. And I also believe that that's because a lot of times in that land, when you get to the point where they're not being buried as deep, that is also because they are being buried on top of other spirits. So now there's a whole bunch of people being buried, or a whole bunch of spirits just kind of like roaming in that space, because they don't have the opportunity. And again, it could granted very well be the same way in Canada, but from the experiences that I've had, I've just always felt like they are buried very high to surface. And I think that that also plays a part in it. Now, what I also think is, obviously there is that unresolved trauma. And I feel like for, you know, smaller island, the Jamaican culture in general, they never really believed in like therapy. They don't believe in therapy. They don't believe in depression. They don't believe in all of those things, right? Because they have had to go through so much trials and tribulations, and they have had to fight through so many things that I genuinely just don't feel like I feel like there's a lot of unresolved trauma that happens. But it's not even about the unresolved trauma. I think it's more so about the sudden deaths. So if I can speak from my personal experience, I have a cousin, God rest her soul. She passed away years ago. And I will never forget this, because when she passed away, she had passed away in her sleep. She had gotten in a car accident and she passed away in her sleep. And it was kind of like, imagine going to bed and then you just never wake up. But your spirit obviously assumes that you have waken up, that you have awakened. And so it is said to believe that after 3 days of you passing, that's when your spirit rises, right? Your spirit rises after 3 days of passing. And that is when you're kind of now like moving in town, moving in spirit. You're moving around like you are alive. Because for a lot of times when you have those sudden deaths, the spirit does not realize that it's no longer being connected to the vessel. It's no longer inside the vessel. And so, again, depending on, you know, how spiritually in tune you are, what happened was, she had risen and people were dreaming her, but they weren't physically seeing her. And then when we went to her funeral, there was a couple people who had said that they had seen her standing over the gravesite and holding her head, and she was just in shock because she had finally come to terms with recognizing that she had passed away, and that everyone here was here for her and her passing. And so a lot of times with spirits, there are those kind of experiences where people die suddenly, and, you know, they die suddenly and they don't recognize that they have died. And then when they do recognize that they have died, it's really about, are you ready to just be laid to rest, or do you want to kind of wreak havoc? And the reason why I say wreak havoc, I really shouldn't say wreak havoc, but in some cases, again, because Jamaica does not have all of the amenities that we do in foreign, basically imagine being very sick, having to be in your home, you pass away, and your family members, when you were alive, were not treating you well. They were, you know, making you feel like a burden, making you feel like this, making you feel like that. Those are a lot of things that can contribute to unresolved trauma, that when you pass away, you almost like want to make their life, it sounds bad, but you almost want to torment them because they were treating you so bad. You know, when money starts getting into play, people start acting different. People start acting crazy. People start acting all types of way. And so there are a lot of reasons why spirits may roam. There is also sometimes where spirits may roam where, again, just depending on whatever it is in that sense of duppy. Now remember that there are different types of strengths, okay? Not all spirits have the same power. Some are just residual energy, while others are conscious entities that can communicate and influence the physical world. So I think that there's that. But then there's also sometimes where there are duppy that people send. And so that is the dark side of Obia. That is the dark side of spiritual work, where they can send a spirit to watch you. They can send a spirit to slow your progression. They can send a spirit to be eating with you and you're getting sick. They can send a spirit that is sleeping with you and you're having problems conceiving. There are a lot of things that when you go into the depths of duppy, when you get into the depths of it, there is, to every light there is dark. And so those situations or those scenarios can get very dark and they can be very light. So without getting into detail, obviously there is that notion. A lot of times when there are duppies around you, you will find that, I think I had said this a couple years back and people thought I was crazy, but you will have duppy pinch. So if there is a duppy that maybe is restless, okay, so this can still be your family, but this is just someone who is restless. At this point, they have not come to terms with the fact that they have passed. They cannot rest. Their spirit cannot rest. They feel like they still need to be present on earth, right? If a spirit tries to touch you, the living and dead can't intersect. So a spirit trying to touch you is automatically going to bruise your body. You're obviously going to have remnants of it. It's the same way how, you know, sometimes kids will never have an appetite. That's because duppy is eating with the children. And so because the duppy is eating the food, the child has no appetite. Because again, living and dead cannot mix. Living and dead don't agree, okay, as Jamaicans would say. So there's also that aspect that you have to take into consideration. We then have ancestral spirits, okay? These are strong protective spirits that can guide and warn family members. So these are your ancestors who are there to protect you. They're there to cut and clear obstacles from you. You are creating your ancestral altars for these people. They are not there to harm you. They are not restless. They have now come to terms with the fact that they have died, but they have also come to terms with the fact that they are here to protect and they are here to serve. They are here to help guide their ancestral lineage, through any obstacles that they cannot see that are being passed through the spiritual realms. Again, there is light and there is dark. So there is always that aspect of knowing that people will spiritually badmine you. People will spiritually have evil eye on you. People will spiritually wish harm on you. That still has to go through a frequency. That still has to go through a spiritual realm. And so a lot of times those things are spiritually protected by your ancestors. Those things are spiritually blocked by your ancestors and cut and cleared by your ancestors. So that's a great way for you to kind of tell the difference between the two. And then you do have the divine or elemental spirits, which are connected to the land, water, and sacred spaces. A lot of those are like Mama Oshun, Yamea, those kind of like, you know, High John the Conqueror. Those are kind of like your spirits. Now, I know that we talked about the different strengths of spirits. So I want you to take into consideration that imagine you have a duppy. And a duppy is evil. A duppy is there to hurt you. A duppy is there to harm you. They are powerful. But there can also be some duppy or some spirits that are just strong in general. They were a spiritual being when they were alive. And when they passed away, it is almost like they never left. It is almost like they've kept themselves very present. They want to be seen. And sometimes these spirits want to be seen to protect you, to warn you, to hurt you. Unfortunately, it's really sometimes just an array of experiences and what that looks like. And again, sometimes those elemental spirits or those duppies can come in the form of other forms. So a lot of times in Jamaica, they say puss or cats are spiritual animals. So when you see a cat, you know, run past you, or you see a cat in your home, or you see a puss in your home, that is eyes. Someone has sent eyes on you. Could be good, could be bad, but someone has sent eyes on you to watch you. And so they will say a lot of times, like, they don't want puss in their yard, or they don't want puss in their house unless it's their cat, unless it's their puss, because people will send the eye to go watch you, and they will send a cat to do so. So why do spirits roam so freely in Jamaica? So again, African burial customs were deeply sacred, but colonialism disrupted this. Many enslaved people were buried without proper rites, leaving their spirits restless. They did not go through the proper burial rituals. The maroons maintained traditional burial customs, honoring their dead properly to ensure that their souls transitioned peacefully. But as life and death has been colonialized, a lot of those traditions aren't carried through. So when we talk about improper burials that led to restless spirits, a lot of plantation owners buried enslaved people in unmarked grave, leading to an excess of unsettled spirits. Okay, there's a lot of stories of plantation hauntings where you're seeing spirits seeking justice or peace. Those are angry, like the Rolls Hall Great House Annie Palmer's legend, which is a haunted site linked to slavery. So because of that, we're always walking on ancestral spiritual roads. It doesn't matter where you are, at some point someone had passed away on these roads. And again, with so much science being, or like voodoo or obia being worked in the island itself, because a lot of people are using it for good, a lot of people are using it for bad, there is a clash of good and evil kind of spirits that are now roaming. I don't know what it is about Jamaica. I genuinely do feel like because it was already a spiritual ground for the maroons and a spiritual grounds for the Africans when they came here, I just feel like there was a veil that has been lifted that is extremely thin, that it's almost come to the point where people are just naturally used to whatever it is, right? And I feel like ancestrals are still very present. They still watch over, they still communicate. Okay, now seeing spirits is what I mean when I say that different dimensions can intersect. So some spirits don't just appear as like shadows or whispers, or like, you know, you see something in the corner of your eye. Sometimes they can manifest as full-bodied beings. The only way for you to really be able to tell that these are spirits are, from my experience, is three things. One, it's very rare that they talk, and if they do talk, they don't say a lot. They probably say a word or two. Two, it's very rare that when you look at their feet are actually touching the ground. It's almost like they're floating. They will have a full body, but their feet never really look like it's touching the ground, okay? Or you will just see the spirit, they will be there, and by the time you turn around, they are nowhere to be found. It's like you don't know where they disappeared to. And that was what my experience was when I was in Jamaica this last trip. So we were going to Bay, we were going to Ochi, and we were in the car, we were all in the car, and someone hit our car. And when someone hit our car, now again, keep in mind that every single individual has their own energetic field. Every single individual has their own spiritual protection, their own spiritual attacks. Everyone has their own spiritual world that they're living in, or their own spiritual experiences that they are having. So basically what happened in this particular situation is the car hit us, and people started coming out of the car that had the bus that had hit us. And no one said anything at the time, but everyone saw this white. She was a full white lady. Okay, we seen her face, we seen everything about her. And we were all sitting in the car, so we obviously saw the top half of her body, but everyone seen this white lady come off the bus. She came off the bus, she looked at everyone in the car, or I don't know if she looked at everyone, but I seen the lady looked at me, I looked at the lady, and she looked pissed. And this could be a spirit that was on its way to do something, a spirit that didn't get to fulfill what they were supposed to do, or a spirit that just naturally is cross, just angry, just miserable. But anyways, we looked at the lady. When we looked at her, she looked back, and I kid you guys not, like I kid you not. By the time the lady walked to the front of our car, nobody knows where this lady went. We didn't see this lady get on the other bus. No one's seen this lady walk down the street. No one's seen this lady walk anywhere. And she was wearing like a maid outfit. Like she was wearing a maid wardrobe. And the place that our car got hit is actually a very popular place that people get in car accidents and pass away. Two of my cousins passed away at that exact same light. So it was just like a full circle moment of like, we were all having this experience of seeing the spirit. And again, this wasn't my first time experiencing it. Now, that's to show you how powerful that spirit was. And also, that light being somewhere where a lot of spirits have sudden death, the veil is very thin there, right? You might find that you have a lot of paranormal activity in that one space because of the simple fact that a lot of people die right there. Unfortunately, God rest their soul. So, that is kind of like the experience that I've had. Growing up, I've had another experience where we saw a lady sitting at the end of our driveway in Jamaica, and she looked exactly like my great grandmother. And she was sitting there, and at the time my dad had like, you know, said to her like, "Are you all right, mama?" Like, he didn't realize that she looked like our great grandmother, but he saw this old lady like sitting on the ground, again, this white lady. He said, "You okay, mama?" And she said, she's like, "All right, my son." And by the time we pulled up, we turned the corner and got halfway to the driveway and looked back around. She was nowhere to be found. Okay, she was nowhere to be found. She couldn't have walked up the street. She couldn't have walked down the street without us seeing her. And she was just nowhere to be found. So sometimes it could be that, yes, spirits are there to protect you. Sometimes spirits are there just to let you know that they're seen. A lot of times it is your ancestral, you know, your ancestral lineage. And a lot of times there are spirits that roam or spirits that are present and they don't make themselves be seen. You might know that there's a spirit present because the hairs on the back of your head raise, or the hairs on your arm raise, or you smell something that smells almost like feces. It smells really, really bad. It's a really nasty odor. Sometimes it could be, again, where you get the duppy pinches. Sometimes if you have an animal, you might see that your dog or your baby, because baby's third eye is always open, and animals' third eye is open. Animals and babies are the most spiritually inclined beings on earth. And so sometimes you'll see a baby's eye following something, but you don't see anything. Sometimes you'll see your dog or your cat or whatever it is looking at something, barking at something, and you don't see anything. Sometimes that can be a sign of it. Now, great ways for you to be able to protect yourself. Obviously, spirits do not like red. So I always say to sleep with like a red cloth above your bed or a red cloth at your foot. You'll see babies in the Jamaican culture, when they're babies, that they'll have a little red string tied to their arm to protect them from spirits. Not, you know, let's say that you have a baby and your grandmother or grandfather passed away. You don't want them to try to be touching the baby while the baby is sleeping. So I'm going to quickly just go to the tweet because I want to make sure that I answered all the questions that you guys had, or all the questions that you had asked me to basically go over with this tweet. So just give me a second. Let me just make sure. Okay. So, they do speak. Sometimes, again, spirits can come to you in your dreams. Sometimes spirit can come to you, in any portion. Before we get into the questions, I do want to talk about the sacredness of land and water in Jamaica. So as you guys know, I am always the girl to tell you that I'm going to Jamaica and I need to be in the ocean and I need to put my bare feet in the grass. I just always feel deeply connected to the land and deeply connected to my ancestors. I feel like the Jamaican soil holds history, and I feel like as a spiritual being, there are spiritually fortified areas. So yes, there are spiritually fortified areas where the maroon settlements remain. There's some in Portland. But I also believe that for where I live and where I am, my grandmother, my grandfather, my great-grandmother, my great-grandpa, my aunties, my uncles, my mom, my dad, like, we all shared this soil in different levels of our lives. And so I feel like that is the most sacred ground for me. My parents growing up, they lived in the same area, so they went to the same beach. They spent time in the same ocean. My grandmother and great-grandmother and great-grandfathers, they did the same thing. And so I always just feel the deepest connection to my family tree whenever I'm in St. Anne's Bay Priory. That's just it for me. So the Jamaican rivers, obviously, the land, is alive. So certain places will obviously carry intense energy. Some parts of Jamaica have a naturally heavier spiritual practice, especially again, like if you go to Portland where there's maroon land, it's believed to be highly protected by the ancestors. People often feel a sense of being watched or protected in sacred areas. Sometimes you go to these sacred areas, you feel like there's someone watching you or there's someone behind you. Again, sometimes when you just go to certain places, you just know that something ain't right. And it's not even that something ain't right, but you just know that you are stepping into the presence of other people. The Jamaican rivers and oceans also hold a deep significance. I always go to the water because it does represent for me purification, transition, and the realm of ancestors. I'm a strong believer that space or whatever is really in the water. I'm a believer that there is an underworld, and I'm also a believer that for a lot of our ancestors, a lot of them passed away in those ocean waters. And so the spirit of the spirits in the water is so powerful. It's like a charge up. It's like a cleanse. That's why you go into the water and you make sure you speak to Mama Ocean. You make sure you offer her something, and you make sure you let her know that you are coming here to be protected, what your intention is when you get into the water. And then, yeah, like how I recharge every time I go to Jamaica, again, just being on the land, I touch the soil, I go to the river, I listen to nature. That's why I don't have a lot of things to post when I get there, because for me, the main factor is I just want to be here. Like, I just want to be here. I just want to be a part of this. I just want to hear whatever my ancestors need to say to me. I just want to know. So that's usually it for me. So let's go into the questions. Let's go drop some questions. There's not a lot. So what's your reaction or disposition when you acknowledge spirit in the physical? So a majority of the time when I acknowledge that I'm in the presence of a spirit, I don't say anything. I'll maybe do a like, so they know that I know that I know that they know that we know that they're here. But a lot of spirits do not like when you announce that they are present. A lot of spirits do not like an announcement. They don't like an announcement. Now, if you feel like the presence is very strong, you feel like the presence is very strong, you get that raise at the back of your neck, and it just doesn't give you a settling feeling like this is my ancestor, this is a family member, they usually don't like when you start cussing at them. So you just be like, get the bumba pussy ras, whatever the case is. But you just be cussing them and they'll just vamoot. They'll just get out of their way. You can also make spiritual sprays. Like, I be having my spiritual spray down, okay? You can make spiritual sprays when you feel like it. And also just treat your home like a sacred area. Like, stop letting any and everybody come into your space, because a lot of times there are really good spirits that know how to be invisible. They still know how to latch onto your energy. They still know how to be a part of those soul ties. They still know how to be draining your energy, even if they are not publicly showing themselves or spiritually showing themselves in any capacity. So a lot of times there's that. Now, if I know that I'm in a sacred area and something spiritually tells me like, this is my granny, this is my grandpa, this is whoever, then I will maybe acknowledge them. I might acknowledge them in my head. I still don't announce their presence to everybody, because a lot of them, again, like I said, they don't like to be announced. So it might just be a thing where like, I just, again, and I wait until I feel like their presence is gone before I let somebody know that they were present. But again, a lot of times if you're feeling like that, it's different if you're at your altar space, or it's different if you're calling them, you're calling your ancestors to come and help you with something, and then you can feel their presence. Then obviously, you know, you can acknowledge them, you can pour out a bottle, pour out some rum for them, do something. But I think that all takes experience and like building a relationship with them, of course. What did I see or how did it appear to you? What body language or things appear to you? So again, a lot of times they look very normal. Like, you're not really going to see something that's going to be like, the hell? It's going to be like, I see this person, and by the time I went like this and looked back again, they were gone. They weren't there. Or you see somebody and like, you see somebody in the dark, you see a shape and you're like, bro, do you see that man? And somebody's like, no, what man? Like, you know what I mean? So that's it. And what are some ways that you could tell that it's a spirit beside them having a specific message? Again, it's really different. It's just, you have to really listen to your body. So again, I think that spiritually it's just really important for you to get in tune. And so, yeah, what are some experiences. Have you ever had any spiritual presences in Jamaica or any other Caribbean islands? Do you believe that spirits roam more freely in certain places? What are your thoughts between burial rituals and restless spirits? Once again, thank you so much for joining me on this video. I hope that it educated you, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.